in the surroundings. His foundation is in the holy mountains. Greetings all Sierra Leone brethren and sisters. Freedom, liberty, lion mountains. No more war in the nation surroundings.
What you just heard was Divide Us, a roots reggae collaboration between Trinidad and Tobago's Daniel Bless and Sierra Leone's Costco B. And the song really carries a powerful message of love and unity and cultural connection, reminding us that our greatest strength lies in standing together.
Them divide us, Babylon divide us, so they can rule us, and abuse us. See ya, them spreading hate in every corner.
As Trinidad and Tobago prepares to commemorate African Emancipation Day, we explore the significance of preserving Africa's rich history and cultural heritage. Sierra Leonean historian, anthropologist and lecturer Francis Musa Momoh joins us to put into context emancipation through the lens of how history informs identity, why protecting historic sites and material culture matters, and the initiatives undertaken like the One Nation Reggae Festival aimed to raise awareness on Sierra Leone's shared heritage, foster people and cultural exchanges with Trinidad and Tobago and the wider Atlantic world. Well, these further lay a sound foundation to understanding Africa's past, generate pride in our youths for the enduring legacies of our ancestors as mirror for future generations. Francis, welcome to Trinidad and Tobago today. It's so wonderful to have you with us.
I'm so blessed to be here.
Now, please help us, with how deep cultural immersion is motivation for travel. Why is it important for Africans on the continent to really visit the Caribbean, in this case, Trinidad and Tobago, noting the similarities that you have noticed between the cultures?
So I'm very happy to be here and also trying to put in context Emancipation Day and how Emancipation Day relates not only across the Atlantic, but spaces on the continent of Africa, right? Because emancipation being celebrated in Trinidad is like preservation of broader African culture, right? So in that context, I will say that travel is underpinned by culture, basically, right? Because cultural immersion, right, is a way of changing your perception about a society and a people. It moves you beyond the primary or conventional tourist trails, right? Say you go to a monument and just take a photo or read about that monument, but you don't really understand the stories or the complexities or the layered history behind that monument. So cultural immersion changes your perception about the society. So that's why, and it also broadens your horizon. It makes you fully immersed, get engaged with the roots culture, so that it also gives you an understanding that will make you be adaptable to certain societies and even understand cultural diversity. So that's why people in these days travel to spaces that they are valued, spaces that respect cultural diversity, spaces that also value heritage management. So cultural tourism is an important segment of the broader tourism ecosystem. And going to having Africans traveling to Trinidad and Tobago, I would say it's an extension of Africa, right? It's an extension of Africa with what has happened during and after enslavement, the African retentions that have been sustained in Trinidad and Tobago and the wider Caribbean context of our people is integral for Africans on the continent and even Sierra Leoneans based on the rich cultural heritage that Sierra Leone and Trinidad shares, to see and learn and immerse themselves so that they can tell a better story. So for instance, you talk about food, rice is the same thing for Sierra Leoneans. Sierra Leoneans eat rice, Sierra Leoneans eat beni, and they eat beni with their rice, which is also the same way that the people in Trinidad and Tobago do. They eat okra and rice. All of that are important part of our culture, which is foodways, and also the quest for emancipation during and after slavery. So Sierra Leone, the capital city that I'm sitting here now talking to you, is Freetown. That Freetown was born out of an African emancipatory and liberative spirits. So those shared values and cultures need to be popularized and educate our two countries about.
Yeah. Francis, Sierra Leone and Trinidad and Tobago share deep historical connections through the African diaspora. So how do you see those ties today?
Yeah, so one of the practice, so because for me, I believe that practice is part of preservation, right? The things that you do and actively do over time is important for people in the preservation industry, right? Or in the preservation landscape. So, for instance, the One Nation Reggae Festival is a cultural immersive initiative. So it goes beyond the music. It educates people about the spiritual values, the spiritual connections, right? So if you look at Trinidad, Tobago, and Sierra Leone, I would want to like put it in context. In 1718, a ship from Bunce Island, Margaret, left Sierra Leone with at least 100 plus people, and then landed in Annapolis, which is Maryland now, which is in the Chesapeake area, in August 1718, right? And that was one of the first time that a unique cultural group was introduced into that area from Sierra Leone, right? And if you look at if you draw a connection between those people who were enslaved in that space and the South Carolina, Georgia, and Charleston and other spaces are also linked to the War of 1812 that brought liberated people that fought for their self-emancipation in the 1812 war on the side of the British, and later ended either in Nova Scotia or in Trinidad and Tobago and became Americans. So there is a deep history from this side to the US and also to Trinidad and Tobago. That is a rich cultural connection. And also during and post-emancipation, you had indentured servants coming from Sierra Leone into Trinidad at the time, during and post-emancipation, and even also free Africans that lived in Trinidad who were crewmen. So the crewmen settlements in St. Mary, Aropuchi in Trinidad are part of Sierra Leoneans that landed in Trinidad. So that is a strong connection with the crewmen, and crewmen we are like the Maroons of the Caribbean, right? They resisted enslavement on the continent, that the British did not enslave them. So they made them crewmen based on the ship, based on their knowledge of the waterways of Africa. So now if you take that connection from here, going to Chesapeake space in the United States, which even the 1812 war was also part of a maritime war that led the Marines, the colonial Marines who were Black, ended in Trinidad, became Americans. So that is a significant part of our connection. There is Sierra Leone Road in Trinidad and Tobago. Just I had mentioned the crewmen settlements. So that's why even when we were doing the One Nation Reggae Festival, the One Nation Reggae Festival, the initiative started on Emancipation Day 2025, August 1, where we also had sisters, family members from the Caribbean, and even a sister, Alia Fraser, from Trinidad, that gave lectures on our work, the Caribbean Herbalism, a book that she had done to students on that day that the One Nation Reggae Festival was launched in 2025, which also contextualized emancipation as a strength and resilience as a form of rallying global African diaspora unity.
Now, I have to ask you, you've dedicated your career to preserving history. What advice now would you give to young people who want to, protect and preserve their own heritage and their cultural identity?
It is important, it's digging deep into your history, right? Young people need to understand their history, because if we talk about decolonization of colonial legacies are not just in monuments, they are in text, basically. They are in text, right? They are in text. So for instance, this is a book written by Cheikh Anta Diop, Pre-Colonial Black Africa. Young people can also dig deep into subject like this that talks about the various contexts of pre-colonial Black Africa prior to disruption of the excellence of Africa, which is the transatlantic enslavement of African people and this involuntary displacement of African people in the Caribbean and other spaces in the world, right? So, for instance, there is when the Portuguese invade, the first time that the Portuguese gained knowledge of Africa was in 1415, basically, and they attacked a sophisticated landscape in Morocco known as Ceuta, right? So I'm just read a space of an eyewitness when the Portuguese, with their marine excellence at the time, exploration, entered Ceuta, massacred people, and then stole a lot of stuff in Ceuta. One of the eyewitnesses had mentioned that our poor houses, he was mentioning Portugal, where he was coming from, because at that time, the kings of Portugal were so poor that they can't even make their own gold, right? So he was stating that our poor houses look like pigsties compared to those of Ceuta, wrote an eyewitness. And that is in Roger Crowley's work, The Conquerors, right? So, and also, you just talked to Gail, who mentioned that she is a griot based on the spoken word that she's saying. And griots are historians, oral historians in West Africa, right? So the area of Mande, which is Mali, as early as in the 13th, from Ghana, Mali, and Songhai, you had griots that could narrate the evolution of that society till contemporary times. So one of the important declaration that talked about early African declaration on human rights as a constitution that was orally dictated by Sundiata Keita on his coronation, Koronkofuga. He stated, they called that the Mandate Charter. The Mandate Charter was a constitution. Basically, it was orally done. And that constitution was talking about a lot of the issues that if young people today can get into some of these subjects around unity, around human rights. It even mentioned that there is no ancient life. Every life is worth. No life is worthier than another, right? That is the dictation, the proclamation, which goes against inhuman treatment, right? And it even mentioned in that constitution that nobody should be hungry and nobody should be raided and enslaved. Yes, so basically, that was one of the earliest abolition of enslavement of African people that is in 1222. Basically, that is in 1222. Before even we're talking about emancipation in the 1800s. Right? So it tells you that Africans since that time, in the era of Sundiata Keita, who was the Lion King of Mali Empire, had projected with his elders, the Council of Elders, to proclaim that slavery is non-existent within the boundaries of Mali Empire. Right? Which is critical for young people to dig deep into African history. Because for me as a lecturer that teaches even comparative slavery, the first day of my class, go to university lectures for year 3 BA students, and you ask them comparative slavery. Most of what they know about slavery is the transatlantic and slavery.
Yes. Absolutely. You know, thank you so much, Francis. That was a very profound point. We really hope that you'll join us again to continue this this very important discussion. But we really appreciate you being with us here on our very special Emancipation Day program. Have a great one, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much to Francis for joining us and sharing a very interesting and knowledgeable perspective. We take a break and then we come back with more.